Welcome back to our daily read aloud, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. Last time we stopped reading right in the middle of a chapter, right in the middle of something that seemed fairly important. Angie, what do you remember?
I remember that she went to the owl, and when she said her husband's name, the owl froze, and he was like, Mr. Frisby, and then they're wondering if he's still alive, and
We had lots of different predictions, didn't we? Yes, but you are right. As soon as that owl heard that she was married to Mr. Jonathan Frisby, everything changed, right? So we don't know why that's so significant. All right, some of you have books out. Put your books away.
Except
Yep, yours is fine because you're reading along. Alex?
I was saying the owl said to go to the brave rats.
Yeah, he said, go to the rats. And she's like, what? I don't know the rats. Emma, is that what you're going to say?
No, she said her name and then he said, Mr. He asked again.
Yes. All right, so today we might find out a little bit about Mr. Frisby. We'll see. Okay, I know I'll probably reread a few things that I already read, but that'll get us back into where we left off. Okay. So he starts saying, oh, this puts matters in a different light if you're Mr. Frisby's wife. And she says, what do you mean? I mean, madame, that there is a way that your son's life might just possibly be saved. I did not mention it to you because I saw no way you could conceivably do it, and I did not want to arouse false hope. But if you are Jonathan Frisby's widow, then perhaps it can be done. I don't understand at all, said Mrs. Frisby. What is this thing? It is not a thing that I can do myself. You must go to the rats. To the rats? But I don't know any rats. They have nothing to do with me. I don't doubt that. They have little to do with anyone except themselves, and will have less as time goes on. Nonetheless, I think they will help you, and if they will, they can. But what can they do? They must move your house to a place where it will be safe from the plow. Now Mrs. Frisby's spirits fell again, and she said almost bitterly, You are joking, sir. You are not serious. No rat could move my house. It is far too heavy, much too big. The rats on Mr. Fitzgibbon's farm have these things, ways, you know nothing about. Lost my spot. They are not like the rest of us. They are not, I think, even like most other rats. They work at night, in secret. Mrs. Frisby, do you know their main entrance? In the rose bush? Yes. Go there. You will find a sentry guarding the door. A sentry is a name for a guard. Make sure you're listening. His name is Justin. Tell him who you are and that you come at my request. Tell him that you want to see a rat named Nicodemus. I think they will let you in, though they may insist on swearing you to secrecy. If they should ask that, you must of course use your own judgment, but my advice would be to do as they ask. Mrs. Frisby was close to complete bewilderment. Secrecy, she said? Secrecy about what? That I cannot reveal. I too have agreed to it. Also, there is much I do not know, though I have given advice on certain aspects of their projects. Well, said Mrs. Frisby, I don't understand at all, but if it might save Timothy, I will try to do what you say. Tell them, added the owl, that I suggest moving the house into the lee of the stone. Remember that, the lee of the stone. Also, do not forget the names, Justin and Nicodemus. Justin, Nicodemus, the lee of the stone, repeated Mrs. Frisby. I will remember. She was now so entirely puzzled that she did not think to ask what the phrase meant. Presumably the rats would know. You two, last choice to do the right thing. And Mrs. Frisby, said the owl, moving again toward the entrance to the hollow. Please understand, I was an admirer of your late husband, though I never met him in person. I wish you well. I hope your son's life can be saved. You see, I can understand your particular need, for I face a similar problem. You? Said Mrs. Frisby. But you have no moving day. I have lived in this tree, in this same hollow, the owl said, for more years than anyone can remember. But now, when the wind blows hard in winter and rocks the forest, I sit here in the dark. And from deep down in the bowl, down near the roots, I hear a new sound. It is the sound of strands of wood creaking in the cold and snapping one by one. The limbs are falling. The tree is old, and it is dying. Yet I cannot bring myself, after so many years, to leave, to find a new home and move into it, perhaps to fight for it. I too have grown old. One of these days, one of these years, the tree will fall, and when it does, if I am still alive, I will fall with it. With this sad prediction, the owl stepped through his doorway, spread his great wings, and was gone, soaring silently downward into the shadowy woods below. Mrs. Frisby followed him out onto the limb. To her relief, Jeremy was still waiting where she had left him, though not very patiently. "We must hurry," he said. "It's almost dark. I'm not supposed to be out so late." Mrs. Frisby, who had the same feeling, climbed on his back, much less afraid now for 2 reasons. First, she was getting used to air travel. Second, since the woods below them were dark, she could no longer see how far away the ground was. Would that make it less scary? Yeah. "He talked to you for a long time," said Jeremy as they flew. "Did he tell you anything that will help?" "I don't know," said Mrs. Frisby. Since the owl had brought up the matter of secrecy, and had in fact been secretive himself, she was not sure just how much she should tell Jeremy. "Why don't you know?" "I mean, he told me some things, but I don't know whether they'll help or not." She decided to counter with a question of her own. "What does 'in the lee' mean?" Jeremy, being like all birds knowledgeable about the wind, knew the answer to that. It means the calm side, the side the wind doesn't blow from. When there's a strong wind, you fly up to the barn from the lee, so you don't get bashed into the wall. My father taught me that. So if you have a really big rock, the side that doesn't have the wind hitting it as much, you could kind of hide from the wind, they want to move their house to the lee of the stone, to the calm side. We don't know why yet. "I see," said Mrs. Frisby, and she became more puzzled than ever. What had the wind to do with it? "He told me," she said finally, deciding it could do no harm, "to go and see the rats." "The rats?" Jeremy was startled. "But they don't have anything to do with us." "I know, but he thought they might help." "Well, what could they do?" "He thought they might move my whole house, but how they could do it, I can't imagine." "Oh, I don't doubt that they could," said Jeremy. "Everyone knows, at least all the birds know, that the rats can do things. They're up to something. Nobody is quite sure what. For one thing, they're building themselves a new house way back in the woods, over the mountains. They've even made quite a big clearing near it. I'd show you, but it's too dark now. They used to carry food like the rest of us, but now we see them with other things. Pieces of metal and bits of machinery and things I can't even recognize. They take them into that rose bush, and what happens to them, I don't know. But the owl knows more than most. I expect he's had some dealings with them. Just the same, I've never heard of their helping anybody but themselves. Neither have I. But I'm going to ask them anyway. There isn't anyone else to ask." By the time they reached the garden, it had gone almost completely dark, and Jeremy could not linger. "Good night, Jeremy," said Mrs. Frisby, feeling almost affectionate toward the crow. "Thank you for taking me, and for waiting to bring me back." "You're welcome," said Jeremy. "If you need me again, just ask. After all, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here to ask." And he flew off into the darkness, the last crow to get home that night. All right, the next chapter is called In the Rose Bush. We're going to get it started. All right, so what do we know is important about the rose bush? Noah?
The rats are bringing machinery and metal in there.
Yes, so we've heard from someone, I think the owl just told us, that the rat hole is in the middle of that rose bush that goes underground. So that's where you have to go to find them. All right, in the rose bush. When Mrs. Frisby got home, Teresa, Martin, and Cynthia were eating supper, as she had told them to do if it got dark before she returned. Coming silently down the tunnel, she could hear them talking in the room below, and she paused a moment to eavesdrop on their conversation. What does eavesdrop mean? Chloe?
Oh,
Yeah? Hudson, you want to add to it?
like getting into someone's business.
Yeah, like if, let's say Hudson and Zoe were having a private conversation and I listened without them knowing, I'd be eavesdropping, right?
Oh, yeah.
Listening when you're not supposed to. So she paused a moment to eavesdrop on their conversation. Obviously, Cynthia had been worrying, and Teresa was reassuring her. She couldn't have got back sooner than this, Cinny. Don't you see? Don't you remember? The crow said it was a mile to the tree. It might even be farther. Yes, but crows fly so fast. But if he went 2 miles high, that was Martin, it would be 3 miles altogether. 6, said Teresa. 2 up, 2 down, and 1 to get there and 1 to get back. That's right. No wonder she isn't back yet. But what about the owl? You know how owls are. What do they mean by that? Josiah?
Just like they can eat
Right.
them.
Yep. It was still light when they got there. He couldn't see. But it's dark now, said Cynthia. Oh, I wish he'd come back. I'm scared. Not so loud, Teresa said. Timothy will hear. I'm home, called Mrs. Frisby, hurrying the rest of the way down. And now it appeared that they had all been worried, for they ran to her, and even Martin, who ordinarily avoided such displays, threw his arms around her. Oh, Mother, cried Cynthia, near tears. I was so worried. Poor Cynthia. It's all right. How high did you fly? Asked Martin, recovering quickly. High enough so the trees looked like bushes, the garden like a postcard, and the river like a snake. Did you see the owl? What did he say? I saw him. Later, I'll tell you about it. First, I want to see Timothy. How is he? Why didn't you move his bed out here? Teresa said, I wanted to, but he said he'd rather stay in the bedroom. I think he's feeling worse again. But when Mrs. Frisby went to see him, she found him sitting up and his forehead felt not at all feverish. I'm all right, he said. I stayed in here because I wanted to think about something. Think about what? About moving day. Do you think she's surprised to hear him bring that up?
Yes.
Yeah, they've been trying to keep it from him. Moving day? But why? What about it? Had he, after all, overheard her talking to the others? Heard about her flight to the owl? But no, he was explaining. I haven't been outdoors since I got sick, so I don't know what it's like. I mean the weather. But today, this afternoon, I noticed something. What was it? A smell in the air, a warm, wet smell. If you sniff, you can still smell it, though it's not so strong now. Mrs. Frisby had noticed this, of course, both indoors and out. It's the smell of the frost melting, Timothy went on. I remember it from last year, and after that, it wasn't long until we moved. Mother, are we going to move this year? Oh, not for a long time yet. Mrs. Frisby tried to sound as casual as she could. It's still much too cold, too early to think about it. I have to think about it, said Timothy. He sounded serious, but calm and unworried. Because if it comes too soon, I don't know how I can go. I tried walking a little bit today, in here, when the others were outside. Timothy, you're supposed to stay in bed. You'll make yourself sick again. I know, but I had to find out. And I didn't walk much. I couldn't. I only went a few steps, and I got so dizzy I had to lie down again. Of course you did. You haven't really recovered yet. I guess I haven't. That's why I wanted to think. Hudson?
When they do move, maybe they could, like, if they're strong enough, maybe they can move their whole house, and then when the person's done plowing, then they can move their house back in, and it'll be all normal.
That would work out. That would work. Alex, real quick.
Or maybe do until the rats to pick the house up.
Yeah, that might work too. What was the last thing I just said? Of course you couldn't walk. You haven't really recovered yet. I guess I haven't. That's why I wanted to think. Timothy, you must not worry about it. That will only make you worse. I'm not worried at all. I thought I would be, but I'm not. Or maybe I think I should be, but I can't. What I really think about is how nice it is there in the summer beside the brook, and it's true. I want to go. Excuse me. But I'm not scared. I was afraid you might be, or that you might think I was. That's really what I wanted to tell you. I'm just going to wait and see what happens, so you shouldn't worry about it either. So Do you think that's what Mrs. Frisby thought he was thinking about? Worrying about her, worrying about him?
Yeah.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't have a child yet, but I would think, anytime you guys are worried, I'm always worried about you being worried. Like, I don't want you to worry. But are you ever worried that your worry is causing me to worry about you worrying?
Yeah.
So sometimes kids do that, but not that often, right? So Timothy seems like he's very observant, and he's in tune with his family's feelings. So he knew his mom was worrying, and he's like, Mom, I'm not worried, so why would you worry? We're going to take it one day at a time. Mrs. Frisby realized that he had somehow switched their positions. He had seen the danger he was in, guessed somehow that moving day was near, and that he was very likely to die. And yet here he was, reassuring her. She wanted to tell him about the owl and the rats, tell him that something still might be done. But she decided she'd better not. She did not really know if they could help. It would be better to wait until she had seen them. So instead, she said rather lamely, Timothy, don't think about it anymore. When the time comes, we'll see how you are and then decide what to do. All right, I'm going to start this next section, but we cannot finish the chapter. The next morning at daybreak, she went to see the rats. Are you guys ready to meet the rats? She had never been in the rose bush before, never even really close to it. And now, the nearer she got, the more nervous she became. No one had ever told her, nor as far as she knew, told any of the other animals to keep away from it. It was just something one knew. The rats on Mr. Fitzgibbon's farm kept to themselves. One did not prowl in their domain. She had, before coming out of the garden, looked around carefully to be sure Dragon was nowhere in sight. But even Dragon, though he would chase a rat up to the edge of the bush, would not follow him into it. The thorns, of course, hoped to discourage trespassers. Mrs. Frisby had never realized until that moment, standing next to it, how very big the bush was, how dense and incredibly thorny. It was bigger than the tractor shed, and its branches were so densely intertwined that, as small as she was, Mrs. Frisby could find no easy way to crawl into it, though she walked all the way around it looking. She remembered approximately where she had seen the rats go in, and she studied that part of the bush carefully. How had they done it? Then she saw that on one branch close to the ground, the thorns had been scraped off, and about a half-inch of it, just big enough for a handhold, was worn smooth. She put her hand on this and pushed timidly. The branch yielded easily, rather like a swinging door, and behind it she saw a trail, a sort of tunnel through the bush, wide enough so that she could walk into it without touching thorns on either side. When she went forward, she released the branch, and it swung back silently into place behind her. She was inside the bush, and it was dark. She walked forward, peering into the dimness and following the small trail which wound in a curving course toward the center of the bush, its earthen floor packed firm by the pressure of small feet. Then, straight ahead of her, she saw the entrance. She had expected, what, a round hole in the dirt most likely? But certainly nothing like what she saw. First, a sizable clearing, about 5 feet across, had been cut from the center of the bush. Branches overhead had been cleared away too, not quite to the top of the bush, but almost, so that the sunlight filtered through easily, and soft moss grew on the ground. In the middle of this bright green cave rose a small mound, 8 inches tall, and the end of which was an arched entrance neatly lined with stone like a small doorway without any door. Behind the entrance, a tunnel, its floor also lined with stones, led backwards and downward. Beside the entranceway, looking at her with dark, unblinking eyes, stood the biggest rat she had ever seen. That's where we stop.
I thought you said we were going to finish the
I thought it was longer. So our next chapter is called Brutus.
Brutus.
All right.
Page 68.
See you guys tomorrow.